Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Monday morning, 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, May 31st, Memorial Day down in the States there. And, I'm just so happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And, I'm glad to be here. I had a little bit of trouble with my trying to get into Blog Talk on my last show, which was Saturday. Wasn't sure if I'd be able to continue on until I got it fixed, but it seems to be working okay, so hopefully it's streaming and everything. And Memorial Day down in the States, that's just awesome. And I'm keeping every single person who's ever served the United States in my heart, I wanted to be in the military, and I wanted to join the military, and I couldn't get in. I would have had to get into civil service, and I didn't want to do that at the time. I wanted to join the actual forces. And so, my heart is with all the troops out there right now who are out there, and every single soldier, men or women who served that country, and in the whole history of the United States, of America. And so, I was born down in the States, and so I just want to say, thanks to every single person who's ever served, and, my heart is with you all, and there's so many people that do love you all so much. And so, and Canada, I'm very much I'm a dual citizen, so I love Canada as well. And for every single troop that's out there right now serving Canada and this great nation, and for every man or woman who serves to keep this country free and the United States free, my heart is with you all. And I know that so many people's hearts are with you, so that's just awesome. So we'll just get right into the show. It's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or therapist certificates. I'm just a person who pays to do my own blog talk show because I just wanted to be one more person out there speaking about abuse and talking about child abuse and getting the information out to people and sharing my own experience, and I thought, if I could be one more person just to be a voice for people who don't have a voice or who haven't found their voice, so that they know that they're not alone and that there is help out there and that we do need to reach out and get help. And, if we feel that we just can't cope or we're having a hard time, there's lots of places you can get help and lots of different types of help out there for people, and just to try it and see what works for you. That's what I'm doing sort of in my journey, and so that's what I'm hoping everybody else will do too that listens to this show, and just to bring some information out to people, that I find while I'm doing my researching online and whatnot. So, you have to listen at your own discretion. I do cover all topics of abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, you name it. That's what I'm doing as I'm talking. I'm bringing awareness and education and prevention, and really just talking about the issues surrounding, especially for adult survivors of child abuse. So you have to listen at your own discretion. You have to know that, if the topic bothers you, then you need to turn the show off. And we're still continuing on with the topic of cutting and self-injury, self-harm, help, support, and treatment. And that's from Help Guide at www.helpguide.org. /mental/self_injury.htm. But if you go to helpguide.org, you can pull up all kinds of great links. There's all kinds of good information there on just about everything that can come up in a person's life, right? It's a great website. So that's what we're talking about today. And we're just finishing up this article, actually, from last week, from Friday morning. And if you're a person under the age of 18, I ask that you have someone listen to this show with you, because there's a lot of adult content on here, and I just think that I don't know how young the people are listening to the players. So if you are a young person under the age of 18, you want to have someone okay it that you can listen to this show, mainly because the topics of abuse aren't talked about very much, and it can be kind of scary for people who haven't heard a whole lot about it. So, and I think online safety is number one for children. They really need to know, you need to know how to keep yourself safe online. And if you have an adult kind of check in on, and sort of pay attention to what you're doing, they can help you make a decision on whether or not you should be listening to it, or if it's something that you should be doing. And because there's millions of child sexual predators out there trying to get a hold of young people on a daily basis. The FBI's website's really good for that. It just gives you the idea, that it gives you the real sort of numbers of how many child sexual predators are out there at any given time trying to get a hold of children, and they will use any means that they can. So that's why it's very important to get the education, get the information, keep yourself safe, and then tell your friends about it, and just connect with your parents or connect with someone who who you trust, who's in your life, and like a teacher, a guidance counselor, a mentor, somebody who can just spend a few minutes listening to this show and kind of checking out what you do online. And then, they can help you to make a decision whether or not it's okay for you to listen to it or not. So that's just what I ask, and I appreciate it. So we'll get right into this article. And I wanted to, Friday, we were looking at, the fact that cutting and self-injury really can be kind of habitual. It can become habitual. And this article is really interesting, and it shows the first incident and then what happens after that, then the next time, what happens after that. We went through that on Friday. But it is kind of interesting how that happens, that self-injury is a progressive process. It can become habitual. So we read all that, and then they were saying here about suicide. We sort of started talking about that, that suicide is usually not really what people are trying to do when they're self-injuring. It's more to comfort themselves, to provide some sort of control over their emotions or their body. And so, but they said it can go too far and it can lead to suicide, and that's the problem with self-injury. So we'll read that part again because I think it's so important. It says, self-injury and suicide. I'm just reading right from this article at www.helpguide.org. You can pull that up and read along with me if you want to. And it says, self-injury is usually not suicidal behavior, but rather a way to reduce tensions. Inflicting physical harm on oneself is a poorly learned coping mechanism which is used to communicate feelings and self-soothe. Self-injury is strongly linked to a poor sense of self-worth, and over time, that depressed feeling can spiral into a suicidal attempt. Sometimes self-harm may accidentally go farther than intended, and life-threatening injury may result, which is why intervention and professional help is required sooner than later, they said here. Because, it might not have turned out to be a suicide attempt, but it ends up being that way because the injury is too great. And so this is the problem with self-injury. It's not a good way to cope. There's better ways to cope. And I know because I used to be the type that wanted to self-injure. I understood the concept behind it. I understood why I wanted to do it. And then I took a good look at why I was doing it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to stop that because I'm just hurting myself and nobody's really going to care and it's not making me feel any better. But I know for some people, they find a relief in it. But there has to be a better way to find that relief. There has to be a better coping mechanisms or something that would work in place of self-injury. That's what I would hope for everybody, that they would find something else that works that does not injure themselves. Like you can put rubber bands around your wrist and snap those when you feel like you're needing to self-injure. That's one way I've heard. There's got to be more ways. You know what I mean? There has to be more. So that's what I would, really suggest is people find better ways to cope because it's just terrible to think that, a person would injure themselves. Life is injuring enough, you know what I mean? You just live long enough and you're going to become injured in some way, right? So I just feel like why do that to ourselves, you know what I mean? And that's why, I guess I'm glad that I didn't go through with it, you know what I mean? 3 years ago I decided to kind of give those feelings up and not attempt that again because I thought, this is just crazy. Like, why would I want to do this when I know that there's better ways to cope? And yet I was having such a hard time finding, what works, sort of thing, right? So that's the whole issue. But what happened to me, I explained on Friday's show, and I actually talk about it quite a bit, is that I just decided that nobody was really why I wanted to self-injure. I took a good look at the reason why, and it was mainly to show the pain that was going on in my heart, and I was having such a hard time coping. And I wanted other people to see just what was going on in my heart, you know what I mean? And I wanted it to be visual, so I was thinking if I self-injured, they would see just exactly how much pain was in my heart. And then I realized that nobody was really going to care, and that really kind of made me feel sad. And then because I thought, no, nobody's going to care, and they won't care if I kill myself either, and that's really the truth. I mean, they might cry, shed a few tears, but, they're not supportive towards me as far as what I've been through in my lifetime, the abuse that I've suffered, right? So I don't have really any support on the outside, right? The only support I have is from a bunch of awesome friends that I've met on Facebook that really I consider my family now, right? Because they are here for me. It doesn't matter what's going on in my life. I can, if I wanted to contact them and just say, hey, I'm having such a hard day, they would be here for me. Whereas my own family would just be like, oh, well, too bad. So that's the problem with that. It's very unfortunate, and it's just because people in my family don't want to admit that abuse even occurred, and they will if they have to admit that some of it occurred, but they won't admit that it actually happened and what my mom actually did to me, and so that's just too bad. That's their own. They have to go, with the conscience that when they move on to the next world, that they're not going to face that whole thing, and that. I'm going to my grave with a clear conscience, right? I believe that truth is everything, and especially surrounding child abuse issues. If that's the whole issue with child abuse, it's all based around lies and getting people to not talk, getting survivors to not talk about it. Abusers don't want it mentioned because then they have to stop what they're doing. Abuse is always trying to be silenced and hushed up, right? And so that's the problem with abuse. And then when people do finally come out and start talking about it, people don't want to hear it, because it's so uncomfortable for them to have to face. So that's why I know how hard that is, right? And I know that quite often families, of course, not going to get very much support in an abusive family, right? Because abusive families are dysfunctional. And it's really hard to find support within that family unit. So that's the problem, right? Quite often people, survivors of child abuse, don't have siblings who are supportive, or obviously if the parents were abusing you, then quite often they're not supportive. It's unfortunate, and most abusers do not want to admit what they've done. They like to blame everything else, and so they quite often will not admit that they've abused people. And so it's hard to work through that stuff and actually build those family bonds back. Because people don't want to admit it, and then no one wants to acknowledge it. So that's just unfortunate for them, because they have to go to their graves knowing that what they do on this earth will definitely have an effect on what happens later. I truly believe that, because otherwise we wouldn't know about truth, we wouldn't know about lies, and we wouldn't know about any of this garbage, right? We know the truth, and we know what is truth, and so by knowing that, then we have to do the right thing and be honest. And, that's the sad part about abuse, is that it's always very dishonest and horrible. And anyone who's ever suffered in it knows exactly what I'm talking about. So it's very sad, and that's why I say, we have to find ways to cope and find people that are there to help us. And so I've had a lot of support, from a lot of awesome people who I consider my family. And they are my friends, and I love them all dearly. And, I've got friends in the UK, friends in Australia, friends in the United States, and that I just count on, and they are there for me, and that's awesome, whereas my own family is really not. So that's just the way it goes. So, it says here, helping a friend or family member who is a self-injurer. That's the next portion of this article. It says, no matter how you look at it, self-harm scares people. Excuse me. It is very hard coming to terms with the fact that someone you care about is physically harming themselves. From the depths of your own fear and helplessness, you may feel frustrated if you are unable to get the person to stop hurting themselves, which can further drive the person away. Some helpful tips in dealing with someone who self-injures. This is what they've written here. Understand that self-harming behavior is an attempt to maintain a certain amount of control, which is in and of itself is a way of self-soothing, right? And let the person know that you care about them and are available to listen. And encourage expressions of emotions, including anger. So, encourage them to allow themselves to feel, right? Whatever it is, even if it's anger. Spend time doing enjoyable activities together. Offer to help them find a therapist or support group. Don't make judgmental comments or tell the person to stop the self-harming behavior. People who feel worthless and powerless are even more likely to self-injure. Because if you become judgmental, then all of a sudden they think, well, fine, now the person I counted on to be here for me is judging me, and now, then it makes them want to self-harm even more, right? It says, if your child is self-injuring, prepare yourself to address the difficulties in your family. And it says, start expressing feelings, which is a common factor in self-injury. This is not about blame, but rather about learning new ways of dealing with family interactions and communications, which can help the entire family. And so that's just it, right? We're supposed to be supportive and try to help people, right? Instead of just judging them and saying, oh, well, you need to stop that because it's not blah, blah, blah. I mean, of course they need to stop it, but the whole issue is getting all over their case is not going to help them to stop it. It's probably going to make it worse, because the reason they're doing it is because they can't control the stress is just, the stress levels maybe are just too high, or they're just feeling so down, or they can't feel anything at all. There's many reasons for it. So we have to be supportive, right? And that's the whole issue. It's very important to be supportive and try to be there for people who are involved in doing this stuff, right? It's better to have a friend than, and to support you along and try to help you to get help, right, than push them away because they won't stop self-injuring or self-harming themselves, right? So important. It says here, how can a self-injuring person stop this behavior? And it says self-injury is a behavior that over time becomes compulsive and addictive. Like any other addiction, even though other people think that the person should stop, most addicts have a hard time just saying no to their behavior, even when they realize it is unhealthy. And that's the same, that's the same with smoking cigarettes. It's the same with anything, right, that becomes habitual. It's hard to stop. And so, mostly what you need is people that are there to back you and support you and say, hey, you can do it, you can quit. I'm here, I can help you find support, whatever you need. When people yell at you and say, oh, if you don't stop smoking, I'm not going to hang around with you, chances are you'll just tell them, well, then don't hang around with me because I'm still smoking. So, that's the whole issue. It's very, very hard to quit these habits, right? It can be done. Excuse me, my voice is really bad this morning. I haven't really talked to too many people over the weekend, so. And, of course, smoking too much, right? So that's the whole issue, right? It's hard to stop addictions, and really what you need is a support person and not somebody who's just going to make you feel worse than you already do, right? So that's the whole issue. What can you do to help yourself, it says here? Acknowledge this as a problem. It says you're probably hurting on the inside and need professional help to stop this addictive behavior. It says realize this is not about being a bad person. And then they said here, this is about recognizing that a behavior that helped you handle your feelings has become a big problem. And then finding one person you trust and get professional help. It says maybe a friend, teacher, rabbi, minister, counselor, or relative. Tell them you need to talk about something serious that is bothering you. And then it says get help in identifying what triggers your self-harming behaviors. And it says ask for help in developing ways to either avoid or address those triggers. And recognize that self-injury is an attempt to self-soothe. And it says learn how to develop better ways to calm and soothe yourself, right? Figure out what function the self-injury is serving. Replace the set of self-harm, the act of self-harm, with learning how to express anger, sadness, and fear in healthy ways. It says treatments for self-injury. I like this article, man. There's all kinds of good stuff in here. It says one danger connected with self-injury is that it tends to become an addictive behavior, a habit that is difficult to break even when the individual wants to stop. As with other addictions, qualified professional help is almost always necessary. It is important to find a therapist who understands this behavior and is not upset or repulsed by it. So yeah, you have to find somebody who actually specializes in self-injury. Right? It says, call your doctor or insurance company for a referral to a mental health professional who specializes in self-injury. And it says cognitive behavioral therapy may be used to help the person learn to recognize and address triggering feelings in healthier ways. And because of a history of abuse or incest may be at the core of an individual's self-injuring behavior, therapies that address post-traumatic stress disorder such as EMDR may be helpful. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Hypnosis or other self-relaxation techniques are helpful in reducing the stress and tension that often precede injuring accidents. And group therapy may be helpful in decreasing the shame associated with self-help, with self-harm, and help to support healthy expressions of emotions. And family therapy may be used both in addressing any history of family stress related to the behavior, and also is helping other family members learn how to communicate more directly and non-judgmentally with each other. I mean, that would be like the best case scenario, right? If you could get your family together and get some family counseling, like to bring people together. That's what my parents should have done years and years ago, when we were growing up and they had so many problems, but they didn't, and it was very selfish on their part. And so, we had to pay the price and suffer through the consequences, right? That's the whole issue, right? And that's so sad because now we're not a family, right? We sort of are, but we're just still very dysfunctional because we don't know how to communicate together, right? Because there's problems communicating within the family, and it's hard, really. It is very hard. And that's the whole issue. If you had a real strong family core, that you could count on your family to be there for you. I mean, that would be awesome. But it just seems like in every family, there's always a group or somebody in the family who's causing problems or just doesn't want to go along with it, or for whatever reason. It's very unfortunate. And I think that the family unit should be the strongest unit. You know what I mean? Like, you should come from a family that will back you up no matter what, and they're there for you. And of course, there's problems. There's always problems. But you could sit down around a table and talk it out, and every person would be present that could be present. And if not, they'd have to be on the phone on a conference call or something. If they're away at college or something, the son's away at college or something, right? Family meeting, family time. I mean, families. This is the problem with society today. The family situation here is broken down, and we don't. So yeah, nobody really can go to their families for help. So they end up having to go to all these other people when really the family should be able to handle it and take care of it. But that's because, if you have two strong parents or one strong coping parent who knows how to cope and has a good head on their shoulders and gets the education really on learning how to communicate with their family and shows their children that, well, then you would have good communication skills, right? And so that's the whole issue. Like, if your family, if your parents didn't do that, then you end up paying the price for that. And that's what happened in our family, right? So it's very, very hard. So yeah, you have to find somebody to talk to. So if your family's not there for you, then you have to find somebody who is, right? And make sure you just reach out and keep reaching out and find someone who can help you, right? Because this is so important. We want to have a good life, That's the whole issue. I wouldn't be doing this show if I didn't feel like it was possible. I've just known in the last 3 years, seen a whole different picture of life than I had ever seen before. Peace came into my heart. Self-love started to come into my heart, right? I started to realize that I did count, I do matter, and that, because of the issues that surrounded the abuse that I suffered as a child don't have to dictate the rest of my life. I don't have to spend the rest of my life miserable and just living in sort of continuing on that cycle of depression and sadness and feeling like it was just, so bad. How can I cope with it, right? When actually I started to take a look at it, on the outside, looking at what happened, and then started to realize that, hey, none of that was my fault, you know what I mean? And how could it be as a child, right? It's not the child's fault, it's the parent's fault for choosing to do what they do to their children, right? That's the whole issue with abuse. The person who's doing the abuse is choosing to do it. So self-abuse, is the same thing. You're choosing to do that to yourself. So, you have a choice to get a different way to cope and a different way to manage that, right? And so, everybody needs to get, realize that they can have a good life, but we just have to get help. And sometimes we just have to get help. We have to get a therapist, a counselor. If that doesn't work and you just tried that and it didn't work, try group counseling, peer support. There's websites out there with peer support and whatnot, one-on-one, somebody talking to you like me right now, but who's been through through therapy and knows what's going on, right? So that's the whole issue. It's just so important. And, just because we can have a good life. I do believe this, but we have to make it happen. It's really not going to happen unless we make it happen. I just can't see it happening any other way. It's not going to fall into our laps. I did, discover that. I was kind of hoping that it would just fall into my lap, this good life, right, that I'd always kind of dreamed about. But it's not going to happen. You have to make it happen. I have to make it happen for myself, right? And so we have to go through the steps to make it happen. It doesn't usually happen overnight. And we have to have a plan, and we have to know, first of all, we have to get better. You know what I mean? Whatever's holding us back and whatever's causing us to feel these bad feelings in our heart and feelings towards life, we have to learn how to get over those. And the best thing to do is reach out, because if you don't, you're going to sit and suffer in silence, and it's really hard when you're suffering in silence, because it's hard to find that hope, you know what I mean? Like, as soon as I started reaching out, people started reaching out to me. And that's what I found, as soon as I put my hand out there was about 5,000 hands coming back to me saying, no, you can do it, here, let's pull you along with us, right? And I mean, that's a good feeling when you have people doing that, and that would have never happened had I not reached out. So that's the whole issue. It's very important to reach out and get some help, no matter what the help is, right? Whether it's professional help or just group support online with anonymous online groups or whatever makes you more comfortable. But just make sure you do keep reaching out to get help. Find a good friend to talk to, and it's so helpful to have somebody to talk to, right? And it says here, in cases of moderate to severe depression or anxiety, an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication may be used to reduce the impulsive urges to self-harm in response to stress, while other coping strategies are developed. And this is the last part they said here regarding treatments. In severe cases, an inpatient hospitalization program with multidisciplinary team approach may be required. So sometimes, people, they just have to go in and they have to become hospitalized in order to get help, right? And that would be probably in the most severe cases of self-injury, when it's becoming life-threatening and it's just, they are out of control, right? And that's so sad. And I would hope people would just not do that, not let it escalate to that point, right? Alternatives to avoid self-harm, it says, if you self-injure to deal with anger that you cannot express openly, try working through those feelings by doing something different. Running, dancing fast, screaming, punching a pillow, throwing something, ripping something apart. It says, if you hurt yourself in order to feel something, when you feel numb inside, hold ice cubes in one hand and try to crush them. Hold a package of frozen food. Take a very cold shower. Chew something with a very strong taste, like chili peppers, raw ginger root, or grapefruit peel. Wear an elastic rubber band around your wrist and snap it in moderation to avoid bruising when you feel like hurting yourself. And that's if you're trying to feel something, right? If you're trying to calm yourself, it says if you inflict physical pain to calm yourself, try taking a bubble bath, doing some deep breathing, writing in a journal, drawing, or doing some yoga. That's if you're trying to calm yourself. And it says here, if you self-mutilate to see blood, try drawing a red ink line where you would usually cut yourself in combination with the other suggestions above. So instead of cutting yourself or doing whatever you do to see blood, you would just draw. You would use a red marker, and that could be the representation for the blood, right? So see, there's all kinds of ways, right, that a person can learn how to cope, right? And if you try some and they don't work, then you just keep trying other stuff, right? Because that's the whole issue. Everybody's different. Everyone's different, and we all have different. What works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me, right? So that's the whole issue. So, you could try a few things. I know there's some good websites out there. I wanted to mention the Child Abuse Monument. It's Irving Studios. That's Michael C. Irving. He's a sculptor and a psychotherapist, and he created the Child Abuse Monument up here in Toronto, Canada. And this has been a few years ago now, but you can check out the website at www.irvingstudios.com. /child_abuse_survivor_monument. But if you just type into your browser Irving Studios or Child Abuse Monument, it will come up. And he's got a great website out there for people who have survived child abuse. That's the whole issue with the Child Abuse Monument. It was made and created by him and with the help of all these survivors of child abuse, right? So awesome. So I really recommend everybody check that out. I've never seen it in person in Toronto, but I've seen pictures just online, and it's just awesome. And what he's got on his website there is all kinds of coping lists for people to learn how to cope if you've been abused and you've survived child abuse or even domestic violence. It doesn't matter. These coping lists are good for anybody who's been through a lot of trauma and a lot of stress and needs to learn ways to cope, right? And there's some really awesome coping lists on that website. And I just really like them. There's coping lists for to take care of yourself, weekly activities, to learn how to just do the things that we should be doing every day. You know what I mean? To get through the day. And there's all kinds of great things. There's coping lists to learn how to manage stress. There's managing stress, managing a crisis, coping list for crisis. So we got about a minute left. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I'm so happy to be. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope you will check our website out, http Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, or www.dreamcatchersforAbusedChildren.com. And there's great information on there. I'm so happy to be able to do what I'm doing and just to be another voice out there for people. And my main goal is to fight for child rights for the rest of my life. And to fight to stop abuse of all types, whether it's child abuse, human rights abuses, right? So that's what I do. And so I'm so thankful to be able to do this, and thanks for tuning into my shows. I really appreciate it. Tonight, it's going to be Elizabeth Brawley and myself on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. And then tomorrow night will be Donna Shear and myself on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. And yeah, the whole week. There's shows all week on Dream at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you want to check that out and hang out with us in the chat room. And I hope you have a great day, everybody. Just make sure you take care of yourselves. We'll continue on with coping lists. I want to look at that Child Abuse Monument coping list tomorrow morning. And You all have a great day. And I did do some changes to my shows, and I'm not sure. I did cut a few shows out because I'm doing extra shows with Dream Factors Talk Radio. So I've actually dropped a few of my shows because I found that it's just a bit hard to keep up with that many shows. But I'm still going to be doing both sets of shows, and just I think I just dropped a few. That's all. So have a great day, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Bye bye.